Anyway, I'm going to introduce my guest for this evening. I am so excited. I was on Dream Queen's show this morning, and now Dream Queen is on my show today. Yeah.
Yay.
We are going to talk about quite a bit. But before we do that, I am going to give y'all a little bit of an update, I guess, of sorts. Here is what I am aware of, and this is just some of it, from what has happened in the last probably just few days, not even the last week in Palestine. All right, it's going to be kind of a bleak list, but genocide is bleak, so here we go. Police in the occupied Palestinian territories, otherwise and currently known as Israel, have been detaining protesters and employing the use of water cannons against protesters who are protesting Netanyahu right now. Sounds like they took a note from America's police on how to handle protesters. Seems bad. The IOF carried out an airstrike on a UN school in Nuseirat in central Gaza, killing 16 Palestinians, wounding 75, mostly children. Sounds about right. Hamas dropped a key demand in the truce deal, or ceasefire proposal, whichever you're calling it by, and that demand was to end the war. Hamas's demand that they dropped was to end the war. That doesn't sound very terroristy to me. Terrorists don't usually want the bad things to end, right? They usually want to keep perpetrating bad things, so...
I don't want to interrupt your
please
newsreel. I'm just
do.
taking notes on what I want to circle back to. But yes, for sure. I got some questions around this one. And some of them stem to what I've heard about Hamas originally being a puppet organization installed by a certain government like Israel. That's something I saw.
Yeah. There's a lot, historically speaking, actually, this is coming out. A lot of people are starting to find out about this. And of course, the Western media is not going to report on this because they don't want you to know these things. But Hamas actually started because of Israel. Israel started Hamas. So the fact that if you put that into account, you try to roll that in with everything, talk about a mess. Wow. But yeah, that is 100%. I've looked into that from multiple sources and it checks out every time.
Yeah.
Which is terrifying.
It reminds me of what the American CIA really has done historically, you know? Mm-hmm. And so we're just, each one teach one, as they say in my culture. Yeah. So apparently imperialists go by that same philosophy.
Who is surprised by that? Goodness. All right. So yeah, Hamas dropped one of their demands in their ceasefire proposal. It was U.S. backed too, which is crazy. And apparently Israel was really upset with Biden for like giving it away, so to speak, or that's what they said. There were a lot of far-right ministers and so on in Israel who were like who immediately took to X and were tweeting like horrible things about Biden, being like, oh, you just gave it away.
Oh, wow. So I've been in, just for the listeners too, I've been in a news blackout for a couple of weeks. And the last that I remember about them all, the cabinet, Netanyahu's people going off on Biden, where
was it Itamar Ben-Gvir?
Yeah, it was the Ben-Gvir one. Yeah. Yeah, you were on my show when I was talking about that one.
Yeah, you told me that
long ago.
That was a total gotcha moment. That was amazing.
So long ago, 6 weeks.
Yeah, right.
Last year.
Wow. It feels like it. It kind of feels like it was last year. But this has been going on for 9 months. So
this is a new batch of catty Twitters from.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
From a bunch of Knesset members. And for those who are unaware, the Knesset is Israeli parliament.
Thank you.
All right, back to what has happened. The IOF took another 15 Palestinians hostage from the West Bank because 9,000 Palestinian hostages is not enough for Israel. I'm going to repeat that number because I think someone didn't hear it. 9,000 Palestinian hostages. That is the number of Palestinians that are currently detained and held hostage by Israel. And all these people talking about bring home the hostages. I've said this before on my show, and I'm going to say it so many more times probably. But when you talk about the hostages, I hope you're talking about all of them, right? We're not just talking about the Israeli hostages. There are 9,000 Palestinian hostages on the Israeli side, and no one's talking about that.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So are they being, in what conditions are they being kept? Are they like work camps?
It's similar to like the migrant facilities in America, just caged off rooms. Mm-hmm. They're blindfolded day and night, handcuffed all the time.
Like Guantanamo Bay.
Yeah. There's actually, Democracy Now! Actually covered this about one of the detainment centers, if you will, and how it is historically, human rights wise, the number of violations, the number of interest that has been taken in this establishment is like through the roof. They of course won't let anybody in. A few of the people who work there have like talked to documentary filmmakers, but other than that, they try to keep it pretty under wraps. And like, obviously, the conditions they're keeping them in are completely inhuman. You wouldn't keep animals in that condition. Yeah. And that is what most of the 9,000 hostages are dealing with, are these conditions. Wow. Okay. 5 more journalists have been killed in Israeli airstrikes. We surpassed the number of journalists killed in World War II like months ago. Mm-hmm. World War II, again, just for those who are unaware at the moment or maybe just forgot, World War II is still called the bloodiest war in history. I think it was 66 journalists died in World War II. We are almost at 200.
Wow. In
Gaza alone.
Do you think that's because this isn't technically a war? Like they're kind of talking through both sides of their mouth. They're like, there's a war. Is it a conflict?
There's a war on Hamas, and people are like, oh, but the casualties. And they're like, this is not a war.
Right. It's just an onslaught.
Yeah. Like, make up your mind. Which one is it?
It seems like an onslaught with a resistance is what it seems like to me.
It does, absolutely. But I also suppose Israel's logic is you can't be charged for war crimes if you kill all the people reporting on them.
Oh, burn.
Yeah. Big time. Burn unit. Another 80,000 people have been displaced from Gaza City since June 27th. That's very recent. 80,000.
Since June?
June 27th.
80,000 displaced since June 27th?
Yep.
Okay.
The IOF confirmed yet another attack on a humanitarian area, or also known as a safe zone, and killed 29 in Deir el-Bala. I don't know exactly what part of Gaza that is, but the fact that the IOF is now confirming these is insane. I keep saying the IOF and I haven't explained it. People are used to hearing it called the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces. I call them, as most people call them, the IOF, Israeli Occupation Forces, because that's what they do. They violently enforce the occupation. That is all the IOF does. So I call them like they are.
Sorry, I'm raising my hand like
no, I love this. This is fantastic. Let's do it.
JJ in the front from KMRV. So when you're saying that other people are calling them the IOF, because I've seen it presented as both ways too in the media, are these other countries media sources that are using the O, and primarily United States media that's using the D? I
haven't. So what? Yeah, Western media is 100% mostly using IDF.
Okay.
Other countries I have seen report as IOF for sure, but a lot of other countries I've also just seen call them the Israeli army.
Yeah.
And just try to make it simple. I guess also it's less political when you actually talk about the occupation.
Right. Because occupation sounds bad.
Yeah, exactly.
Defense sounds righteous.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
When you say self-defense, people don't look at you sideways. When you say, I was attacking the occupation forces, they're like, okay, hold on. Whose side am I on? Which one is bad? Let's go. You said you attacked, but they're occupying. Isn't that just, that like defines what's happening right now?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And it, okay.
It's a lot. It's a lot. We're almost at the end of the list here. Former Department of Interior Special Assistant Miriam Hassanein, I think I mispronounced that, resigned from the Biden administration over, quote, blind, destructive support of Israel, end quote.
She's one of the signatures on this
Yep.
paperwork.
We're going to read from a thing that she signed, actually, in just a moment. Another 9 Palestinians were killed by an Israeli airstrike in Maghazi refugee camp in central Gaza. 7 Palestinians were killed by the IOF in the West Bank city of Jenin. Sewage is flooding Khan Yunis, making it even more dangerous for those displaced there at the moment. Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis is running out of fuel and is under threat of becoming overwhelmed. And this is partially because the threat of being overwhelmed is partially because people had to flee Rafah once again. Rafah was where they were told to go. It was said to be the safe zone. They have to flee Rafah again. So now they're trying to go back north. And that is, at this point, again, 80,000 displaced in Khan Yunis right now, again. And there are still displaced populations that never left. People are still stuck there from the last time they got displaced. One of them is actually my very dear friend Ahmed and his family. I got this information actually directly from him, and I was able to corroborate it with news. Ahmed said the situation becomes more difficult as time passes. During the past few days, a large number of people were forced to flee from the eastern region of Khan Yunis, which increased congestion and made life very difficult. As the main desalination plant stopped working during the past 2 days due to lack of fuel, currently Nasser Hospital is threatening to stop working due to a shortage of fuel and becoming overwhelmed by the people who are displaced. So, I know Ahmed can't hear this, but I hope they're okay. I talk to him every couple days. I try to anyway, and it is really something else to talk to someone who is living through this right now. Sometimes I get messages from him and I'm like in the middle of a shift and it's just enough to crumble me inside. But that's the thing that you learn about the service industry is how to put on a happy face, even if your feet hurt, even if you're sad. Got to make that money.
Sounds horrible.
It's not great, if we're being honest. Service is service. Anyone who's worked it knows that. So that is just all of that we just talked about. That is just some of what happened this week. I didn't even get through the whole week. This barely scrapes the surface. So something to make note of when I talked about Nusret refugee camp is Nusret refugee camp was established in 1948 following the Nakba. If you don't know what the Nakba is, it was the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians in 1948, which displaced 750,000 Palestinians and killed 15,000. So when Palestinians say they're experiencing a second Nakba, they are not lying. Mm-hmm. The numbers, the death toll, I've talked about this on my show so many times the last few weeks. The numbers are believed to be at 130,000 people killed by Israel. The last estimate that we heard months ago, before the health ministry shut down and more things got cut off and more things got destroyed, the number we heard a couple months ago was 40,000. 40,000 is more than the 15,000 that were killed in the Nakba. Much more. Pre-October, Nusret was home to 85,000 displaced Palestinians. It is now host to 250,000 displaced Palestinians. Nusret is also where the Nusret massacre happened, the massacre in which the IOF took back 4 hostages and killed over 270 Palestinians to do so. That was about a month ago. The Nusret massacre was about a month ago, which is absolutely mind-boggling. I can barely, when I think about the things that have happened in the last 9 months and I go through them in my head, the fact that some of this didn't happen years ago is mind-blowing. Like, my sense of time, especially trying to put together so many traumatizing events all so close to each other, it feels unnatural. Like, we're not supposed to experience that much trauma all at once for such a duration of time. It totally does warp your brain.
Yeah.
Time is a weird thing to me now. Trying to keep up with the news and being like, and then like, you know, you're trying to keep the time from my personal life and being like, oh, when did I do this thing? When did this atrocity happen? When did this massacre happen? Did I make sure to pay that bill? It all gets like meshed around. You know what I mean? It gets so messy and messed up in there. But trauma is a heck of a thing to have to endure, even from afar. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You know, we're not living through it, but witnessing it is... Oof.
Well, you know how woo-woo I am, right?
I love it, yeah. Lay it on me.
We're experiencing it in a different way. Is that really what, you know, an aspect of this trauma is that we feel it, mm-hmm. and we see it, and in a way we just feel a lot of things in our body. The trauma response of suggestion. Mm-hmm. The science that's been done on, you know, when you're dreaming, or, you know, when the brain waves that are measured with people under hypnosis or in sleep patterns, muscles are firing in their physical bodies as their mind is having an experience.
Right.
And so on my show in the near future, I hope to have some different therapists, some radical therapists on to talk about what we can do to better process and integrate what's happening and what we're experiencing, because we don't understand the level of visceral reactions we're having in our bodies to this.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, and I don't feel like I can turn my mind off enough to have a different experience.
Yeah.
What we're experiencing also as Americans, I dare say, we're in this conflict. And when you were talking, I just heard this voice in my head say, so what's it feel like to be part of a living in a country that's committing genocide all day right in front of your face, and you can't deny it? Like, what's that like for you? Like, in my head, like, just imagining someone, if I was in another country right now as an American tourist, I feel like that's what someone would ask me.
Yeah.
And I don't know, wouldn't even know how to handle that. Oh, you know, I just do the best I can.
I
pull to work.
Pull the good old, you know, when you have a difficult customer. Sorry, sir, I just work here. Yeah. It's like, sorry, man, I just live here.
It's above me now.
I'm not trying to make this stuff happen. Yeah, I'm trying to actively change it. Yeah. But it's hard, obviously. As we've seen, our elected officials don't care about what we have to say. They don't care about how we feel. They don't care how loud we get. They just back it with more police force and more police brutality and quiet everyone up. They don't report on it in the news, so it feels like we're not getting anywhere. It feels like nothing is happening. And I feel like for me personally, that is part of the trauma of just bearing witness, is the fact that it feels like no matter what I do, I can't make it stop. And that in itself is traumatic. Yeah. You know?
Wow. Another wild scenario just came into my head. Yeah. I'm wondering how it must feel to be a child or a spouse in an abusive family. Yeah. You know, like we are being abused and held down while this other authority figure is literally wailing on our sibling or our kin.
Yeah.
And if we throw ourselves over to defend that person, we know that we could wind up in the same, getting the mess beat out of us and worse, right? Quite literally, especially so now we got to face off with the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
We got to face off with the dictatorship that has been enforced in our own country.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, we are in it, and it's not like we're supposed to not feel anything.
Yeah, exactly.
It, you know, so how to sort out our role.
We're critters. We got feelings.
Yeah, and we have a part to play in this.
Yeah. We
all have a part to play in this. You know, so if you don't know what your part is yet,
figure it out.
Because it's on.
Just kidding. But not really. The world as we know it is going to change, and it's going to change faster than we all think. I mean, we were talking about it this morning. The president is a king now. Mm-hmm. Bam.
So there's really no... Like, we don't have any more room. It's not like on January 1st.
Yeah.
It's like since they said so. Like since the gavel hit.
Yeah, exactly.
We have a king since the gavel hit.
It just is.
Now it is.
Now it just is.
I don't want to call it. I'm not gonna participate in that.
Yeah, man.
I don't of all the dark jokes I can make, I just don't even know if I feel like I can say it anymore. Like, yeah. I don't want to even give that any energy. It's like Voldemort, I'd say.
Yeah.
I mean, like,
it feels like if you talk about it, it's too real.
You know?
Makes me uncomfortable. But, you know, America, capitalism, genocide, these are things that make people really uncomfortable. Yeah. Including myself. But that's why we talk about it. It's good to talk about these things. I learned that from my therapist.
I want one. Where you get one of those?
I found her. She was hanging out on the side of the road. She was like, "You want to talk?" I was like, "Yeah, I could talk."
I wonder if I could exchange work for therapy. It's barter.
Oh, I'm sure someone's out there doing that. I bet they're pretty good too if they're actually willing to barter with people. Like, no, you're good at your job. You like people. You care.
This is why I'm really intent on having the angle on my show. It's because I figure I can work an hour of therapy, and at least twice a month if I can get some therapist activists in there.
Yeah, you can. That's a fantastic. I totally support this. 100% support this.
Working it.
Okay. Are y'all ready? I'm ready. We are going to venture into some gotcha moment territory here. Dream Queen is going to read me some stuff, and you guys are going to get my live reaction to it. So I'm just going to say I'm going to behave.
Oh, please don't.
It's less fun when I behave. It's a lot more fun when I'm not behaving. All right. I think I'm ready.
All right. Well, what I'm going to read to you is something that I found out about. I didn't know I was going to be on your show until this morning at about, I don't know, right after mine when you were on, right?
Surprise!
Yay, gotcha moment. I'm always down the radio.
I love it.
You know, so you were on my show this morning. I got to plug it, 8 to 10 a.m. on Saturdays.
Yep.
In the cab. And we were in here with Little Queen Trash Mouth, who's on the Hashtag Hour. Fridays, 10 to 12. I roll with Plugging the Homies. Because it's a lot of good information that y'all bring. I love y'all so much, you know?
We love you.
It's so much fun, okay?
We had such a good time.
And more is coming up. So when I got home and did my homework, eventually, there was this piece on Democracy Now! About this week wrapping up 12 U.S. government officials who have resigned from this administration over U.S. policy.
Right.
So I thought, wow, I want to get the whole document, as we love to do. And
we like our receipts.
We love receipts. And so I managed to find a copy of the whole letter put out by Counterpunch News Service. Have you heard of them?
I have not, no.
I just found out about them. They made me think of Counterpoint, which is another radio show.
Right.
Right. Counterpunch is a website that's offered at no charge to the general public over the World Wide Web. They use the whole words. The internet.
They don't do the www. Okay.
No, they spell it all out. These are some smart people.
Note taken.
News articles from an independent left-leaning perspective are posted every weekday.
Oh, cool. Okay, yeah. I'm going to check that out.
Yeah. They have a list here of wonderful things. And they even have a batch of several articles, including The Poet's Basement.
Oh, wow.
And a couple of other things, which just seems really interesting. And they publish books and a newsletter and had a magazine from 1993 to 2020.
Oh, wow. They started in the 90s.
Yes.
Oh, look at that. Look at that.
31 years ago.
Oh, ow. My age just hurt.
Well,
oh, no.
That makes me geriatric.
We're all just going into vintage,
That's
Dream
it.
Queen. We're not getting old. We're just getting vintage.
That's right. I'm here for
like
it.
a fine wine or cheese. Cheese.
Yeah. Can we get something to eat after this?
I totally do.
Yeah.
I've been dreaming about nachos all day.
Let's do it. All right. You hear that, little Queen Trash Mouth?
Yeah.
Nachos.
You've just been invited to nachos.
All right. So, this letter, Service in Dissent, joint statement of U.S. government officials who have resigned over U.S. policy towards Gaza, Palestine, and Israel. So you can feel free to find that on the internet. I'm going to start by reading the first page, which just includes why they're here and what they're doing.
Okay.
We are former U.S. government officials who resigned from our respective positions over the last 9 months due to our grave concerns with current U.S. policy towards the crisis in Gaza and U.S. policies and practices towards Palestine and Israel more broadly. We are subject matter experts representing the interagency and are a multi-faith and multi-ethnic community of professionals and patriots dedicated to the service of the United States of America, its peoples, and its values. Whether in the civil service, foreign service, armed forces, or as political appointees, each of us has sworn an oath to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States. And as our nation celebrates its Independence Day, each of us are reminded that we resigned from government not to terminate that oath, but to continue to abide by it, not to end our commitment to service, but to extend it.
Wow.
I want to salute right now.
I know.
I'm like, true patriots.
Yeah. Just funny because saluting is always something that feels ick to me.
Yeah.
But in this situation, I'm like, yeah.
I want a flag cape.
Thank you for that.
Yes. Did you ever watch 1619? Because I haven't brought it up in 2 weeks to anyone.
No.
The 1619 Project, which is the book and the collection of essays from the New York Times, Nicole Hannah-Jones.
Okay.
They did a TV series on it in 6 parts and a podcast as well. It's in so many formats, right?
Yeah.
The first episode is on democracy, and it's that telling of the American story. She was, pretty much the book was banned in many states from being taught in universities, right? You're aware of the 1619 Project.
Yeah.
Right. But she opened the whole thing up with how much of a patriot her dad and her uncles were.
Really?
Yeah, she was like, her dad used to fly a flag in the front yard up and down every day. And she was like, what? And then the way that he explained it, the story of African Americans building this country, fighting for this country, dying for this country, attaining civil rights for every group of marginalized people, under a banner that we fought for and bled for in this country. Is like, doggone right, I'm a patriot. This is my country.
Wow. Yeah. That, and heck of a stance to take on the matter. And I can't throw shade at that.
No. And it reminds me,
I would support that kind of patriot 100%, but unfortunately a lot of the patriots that we see these days are terrifying.
They are
terrifying human beings.
And it's very interesting how we're gonna how to move forward through that. It really, as we're coming out of 4th of July and Juneteenth and all of this, it also reminds me of the delegates. I think it was 5 African American men who went to the White House to talk to Lincoln. Like they had Lincoln like had them brought over. Like, we need to speak to y'all. Like, would you please go back to Africa? And they were Frederick Douglass and they were like, no, we ain't going to no Africa. We just built this whole thing. What are you talking about? Yeah, that was the first.
Wow.
Yeah, that's like classic.
The audacity.
Yeah. Oh. I wish I could remember the names of everyone who was in that contingent. Maybe I'll look it up. But wow. Yeah, they were like, no, we have another proposition for you. How about we
have a better idea.
Be equal.
Yeah. Like people do.
Yeah. And it was like, I mean, if you're looking at how many people were slaves at that time in history, it's like 5 million people. It's
a lot of human beings.
Yeah. I highly recommend watching that. The Hulu special is really, it's easy. Okay. And really good. But they have a lot of facts like that, like how many people were actually, because they go into the U.S. economy. Yeah. And now dealing in human trafficking. It's like, oh, there's human trafficking. Yeah. Yeah. And the government knows about it. Yeah. They kind of wrote the playbook. You can get this much for a person. Did you know that?
Yeah. More than they know about it, they are actively doing it.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't be surprised if some of the hassles in the border are just people getting kickbacks on selling laborers that are being forced into labor, as payment for crossing over. Mm-hmm. Everybody's getting kickbacks down there.
It's slavery is alive and well. It didn't go anywhere.
No. And it's looking real ugly. Anyway.
Yeah.
So there's a little paragraph here about how hard and somber it was. And I'm like, okay, but you signed up to be a part of the government. Yeah. So it wasn't.
You did this.
Yeah. Why are you even here to quit a job that you know?
You know how you get jobs in the first place, right?
Right. Did you research the organization before you signed, before you filled out the application?
Did you look into it? Oh my gosh.
Always research the company, folks. So the third paragraph. The administration's policy in Gaza is a failure and a threat to U.S. national security. America's diplomatic cover for and continuous flow of arms to Israel has ensured our undeniable complicity in the killings and forced starvation of a besieged Palestinian population in Gaza. This is not only morally reprehensible and in clear violation of international humanitarian law and U.S. laws, but it has also put a target on America's back. The intransigent policy risks U.S. national security and the lives of our service members and diplomats, as has already been made evident with the killing of 3 U.S. service members in Jordan in January and the evacuations of diplomatic facilities in the Middle East, and also poses a security risk for American citizens at home and abroad. Despite this, the administration's choices have continued to threaten U.S. interests throughout the region. Our nation's political and economic interests across the region have also been significantly harmed, while U.S. credibility has been deeply undermined worldwide at a time we need it most, when the world is characterized by a new era of strategic competition. So this whole paragraph about it's in our own best financial and security interests to act right.
Yeah.
Because
it is.
Yeah.
100%. I mean, if you just look at how many countries have now made the steadfast decision to cut ties with Israel, with so-called Israel. Because if you say occupied Palestinian territories, people are like, huh? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. You have to call it Israel and no one knows what you're talking about. But it's, it's wild.
What can we say? Can we say OPT?
OPT.
What can we say?
That is actually how the UN, in UN documents, they use OPT.
Yeah. Yeah, I think...
It's a recognized term. It's amazing.
Well, great. That's great. To know that I'm vibing this.
Yeah.
Because I feel like if we need to start calling things what they are, or else it becomes normalized real quick.
Absolutely. I mean, again, everyone thinks that Israel is a country. It's not. Mm-hmm. It's a false state. They are an occupier. And something else people probably don't know, which I didn't know, actually. And I'm happy to admit when I don't know things or didn't know things. But I learned in the last 9 months. I was unaware of this. It is enshrined in international law that a people have a right to resist an occupying force. It is so this idea that like, you know, well, they shouldn't have been resisting. Well, like, you know, this isn't how they should have gone about it. First of all, you're not the one who's oppressed. You're not the one who's occupied. You don't get to tell them how to handle their occupation or their resistance. Like no one does. Even I don't.
Yeah.
I'm not going to try and tell Palestinians how to handle, you know, their statehood if they were ever granted statehood. I know that that was a thing that was going through the UN and of course got shot down by the US. And Israel had that tiny paper shredder. Did you see
No,
that?
I didn't see it. A tiny paper shredder?
They brought a tiny paper shredder up to the podium. I wish I was making this up. It sounds like I made this up. They bought literally a paper shredder. Y'all can't see my hands, but Dream Queen can.
Yeah, it's little.
Little, tiny, like the size of a sandwich.
Like an easy bake oven.
Yes.
Like if it
like
a
Tupperware
fake
container.
shredder. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it was so noisy. And they took this little tiny document they printed out and they put it through this tiny shredder at the podium to try and make this like big dramatic point about like you're making a mockery of the UN by even suggesting Palestinian statehood. And it was like, y'all got let in.
Yeah.
No one complained about that. Yeah. But like here, Palestinians want to have a voice and you're like, well, they're not people. They shouldn't have one.
Beasts on two legs, you know, beasts.
Dehumanization at its finest work yet so far in history. It's incredible. Okay, back to the thing.
All right, back to the thing. Critically, this failed policy has not achieved its stated objectives. It has not made Israelis any safer. It has emboldened extremists, while it has been devastating for the Palestinian people, ensuring a vicious cycle of poverty and hopelessness, with all the implications of that cycle for generations to come. I kind of want to take a moment here.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of a glossing over.
Yeah.
To me personally. And I don't know, I'm not here to edit this, but it's still very much centered around one side. And the idea that vicious cycle of poverty and hopelessness is just understating the whole thing in that, to me, you know?
Yeah. That is a very, very glossing over way to put that.
You know, I mean, the fact that entire family lines are now gone from the roles. There's no generations to come for many people.
Yeah.
And so that's where I was thinking, you know, when you were talking earlier about how, you know, about doing the show, and I was like, there's so many things on this subject that I think is counterproductive to say.
Yeah.
But they're real feelings and thoughts. And it's just sad to like give lip service to any people really having a future.
Absolutely.
That have lived there.
Yeah.
And the children that will grow up maimed and mentally disturbed. Like everybody is pretty much like the mental illness is off the charts at this point.
The whole of Gaza.
Yeah. Men,
women, children, but specifically focusing on the future. How are these? That is the other thing I just don't understand when they talk about like, well, Israel is just after the resistance. They're only after Hamas. No, they're not.
Yeah.
No, they're not. Well, also, this is my favorite point to bring up in that case, but Hamas isn't in the West Bank. So what are they doing in the West Bank? Like, no one can explain the aggression and the things that are happening. I mean, again, I read a minute ago, just in the last couple of days, more than 30 people were killed in the West Bank. The West Bank is not Gaza, and Hamas doesn't run the West Bank. There's no Hamas there. So when they go after people in the West Bank, I'm like, how is this tied? But in terms of future generations, when people say, oh, they're just going after the resistance, they're only going after the terrorists.
Yeah.
They're trying to wipe out the resistance. Do y'all know how resistance starts?
Yeah.
By wiping out.
Yeah.
You have created an entire generation of children in Gaza. The U.S. and Israel have created an entire generation of kids who are now going to be the resistance. They are maimed. They are amputated. They are missing limbs. They're missing family members. A lot of them are orphans. And people think that they're just going to go about their lives quietly when this is over, quote unquote. Like, no, you just bolstered it. You made it worse. On that note, very unfortunately bleak note, I do remember a member of the Knesset saying something along the lines of, that's why we have to wipe out everyone in Gaza. Mm-hmm. When she said specifically they were talking about Hamas, it started with them talking about Hamas. And she was like, do you know how Hamas started in 1987? It was because of a massacre that took place in Gaza. Hamas became a party. And it's like, you think that going out and killing multiple people in families and having kids who have to be amputated, you think that's not going to create the same resistance? This is what started it in the first place. So when they talk about stuff like that, I'm like, oh my gosh, y'all are creating it more than you're destroying it. And I cannot imagine for these kids what the future looks like.
I was listening to you and also searching this origins of Hamas conversation, and it's not enough time to deal with the pop-up ads in this article by The Intercept.
Oh, who's got time for that?
Yeah, nobody's got time for that. But I do want to, I don't know, later
we need to circle back around to that for sure.
Because, I hear that, like how, on the one hand, I know that they were getting funding from the Israeli government at some point. And, because we have that same story in Iraq with our coup, and how we helped get certain people into power. And then, when they've run their time and gotten a little ahead of, now we're going to get the infidels out, then we get off them, and put in a government. We did this with
America's so good at that.
Afghanistan and Iraq.
We've done, America's done it all over the world.
Nicaragua, El Salvador.
Oh, we're just start.
And we goes on.
Just start naming countries, and I'd probably just have to be like, oh, that one wasn't. But I'd probably, if you just started naming random countries, there are probably 5 that I'd be like, it didn't happen in these ones, but you were right about the rest of them.
Right. All right, well, I'm going to skip some of that paragraph. Yeah. It's just pretty much clear that they're going off on that. Now they go into describing one section describing the current crisis and acknowledging that first and foremost is the catastrophic and rapidly escalating humanitarian crisis that the Israeli government has created for the Palestinian people, for whom the missteps of the ink of American bureaucracy has been paid in the blood of innocent men, women, and children. To date, over 37,000 Palestinians have been killed. The vast majority of civilian and humanitarian infrastructure has been destroyed. Thousands of innocent people remain missing under the rubble, and millions continue to face a manufactured famine due to Israel's arbitrary restrictions on food, water, medicine, and other critical humanitarian goods. Yet rather than hold the government of Israel responsible for its role in arbitrarily impeding humanitarian assistance, the U.S. has cut off funding to the single largest provider of humanitarian assistance in Gaza, UNRWA, the UN Agency for Palestinians. How do you pronounce that?
UNRWA?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I always end up skipping the W. It never makes it out.
Yeah. This paragraph is the one that I kind of pointed out to you, and it's the middle one in this. Is second, we note with further concern and sadness that U.S. policy for many years, but particularly since October 2023, has not only contributed to immense humanitarian harm, but has failed when measured against its own declared intent to contribute to the peace and safety of all in the Middle East, and particularly to that of Israel. Rather than using our immense leverage to establish guardrails that can guide Israel toward a lasting and just peace, we have facilitated its self-destructive actions that have deepened its political quagmire and contributed to its enduring global isolation. There is no regional settlement, no agreement with autocratic regimes, no diplomatic step short of the resolution of the Palestinian right to self-determination that can provide Israel with real security. Now that's a little cloudy for me. It's like they're saying that Israel's first and foremost, but at the same time, they're saying that there's nothing else they can do except grant Palestinian self-determination.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of leaders globally that are saying that.
There is, and it feels kind of double, like both sidesing a little bit to me, and I don't like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is a lot, though. That's a lot to take in.
Yeah. Yeah, I've got a couple things circled, like particularly that of Israel. And
yeah, that is an interesting statement to add in.
Yeah.
To this letter.
Well, and again, I think it is involved that we haven't told the audience this yet, but look at how many Arabic or Muslim sounding names are on the signature list, even though they're multi-ethnic people. You know, we got a Muhammad, we got a Tariq, we got a Maj. Oh, that's Major.
I bought it. I was in.
Major Riley Livermore. So we got a Riley Livermore and a Lily Greenberg call. You know, and we got a Stacy, but we have Miriam Hassanin, who you said, and Hala Raharit, who was the first one to resign. I remember
was she the first?
She was on Democracy Now! A couple of months ago. She was the first one. And she was the spokesperson for the Middle East and North Africa, the Department of State.
Wow.
And yeah, she had a very moving moment in the news where she's like, I didn't sign up for this. And I'm like, you are literally...
You know what America's about.
Diplomat to Palestine and the Middle East and North Africa for the State Department. What do you mean?
Yeah, this has been happening since the 1940s. Since before that. You knew. It's
propaganda when you're in college, right? When you're reading the book, when you're sitting there and you're like, I'm going to go work for the State Department because my parents want me to. And I think it's going to be great. Like, then the books that are out that are like, what, Confessions of a Economic Hitman and all of these things that, like, a lot of folks require reading for what the whole process of the CIA and dark ops is doing. But you don't want, it's all just jive when you're in school looking for a job. You know, I don't know.
Absolutely.
So now you got to quit. Look out for these organizations where you apply for these jobs, people.
Look into your employer before they become your employer.
They're not just interviewing you. You're interviewing them as well.
Yeah, make it worth your while. I know it's a job, but make sure that you're not digging yourself into something deeper.
But I will say that I give it up for these people because when we're talking about what we can do going forward, everybody has a right. Everybody has the place to recognize where they may have had missteps and correct. But, we do need, we talked about what, reform versus dismantling and what the subtle difference is around that.
Yeah, because reforming doesn't make a difference if the origin is rotten.
Right.
We talked about that with the founding fathers.
Right.
Yeah, it doesn't matter how much you try to reform a system. If the system was built to only function to serve one kind of person, that system is broken and at the same time is functioning exactly how it's supposed to. So trying to reform that system is not going to give you anything good.
Right. Well, you can take what works and leave the rest. What
right?
works? I don't know.
I mean, if we have, some folks of color up in the White House, I could see some reform, some decent reform actually happening.
Well, you got Kamala.
No.
Come on, the nation just needs a big hug from Auntie Kamala.
Oh, God. I don't want her to touch me.
Did you see that Drew Barrymore bit?
No, I didn't.
Wait, no, really?
I haven't.
Oh, my God. It's the best. What? On Drew Barrymore's show, Kamala Harris was on. I've started a whole hashtag thing. Okay, I didn't get behind it. I need to do more with it. It's Mammy No More in 2024.
Oh my gosh.
The hashtag. Okay, that's right. Wow. That's fine. Okay, but anybody can use it. Start the movement. So what happened was she was on the Drew Barrymore talk show that Drew has, and Drew said, she gets that Drew Barrymore look on her face where she's like, I just like a lot of us are feeling really sad and despair right now, and we're just looking to you, like, I think the whole nation just needs a really big hug. Can we just get a hug? Yeah. And then Kamala was like, okay. And then like gives Drew the hug, I believe, on the show. Yeah. I mean, I think they did the hug, but the whole point was just like, really, Drew, like, we're here and you're like the Karens need a hug.
Yeah,
like,
inflation is skyrocketing, wages are stagnant, housing is a nightmare, healthcare is a nightmare.
And yes, we do need a hug, but not from her. I need other things from her. Before put a hug on, okay? Yeah. But can I get a whole bunch of other things?
Yeah, I've got a laundry list.
I got a list. And hug is after.
Hug is at the end when you give me all the stuff.
That's like then I'll take your hug. It's a gratuity. It's not a bribe. Yes. See, if I hug you up front, that could be seen as a
maybe I'm trying to butter you up. I don't know.
Especially if it's a good long one.
Now everyone I hug is going to be suspicious. Be like, what do you want? You're hugging me. What do you want?
Human rights.
Yes.
Basic needs met. Free healthcare.
I just want to be alive. I don't want it to be so expensive. This place.
Man. Should I go into the
Yeah, let's do it.
The what is to be done?
Yes. I'm curious because this is the part that I I have no idea what this part says. Yeah.
And just to wrap up the upper part, it's just they were just saying that they've seen through their leadership collectively the silencing of concerns about Israel, the human rights violations, laws being sidestepped, debates being silenced in government, facts distorted. Yeah. The failure of the Oslo process and broader U.S. policy and things like that. So they've just got all their receipts on there. So one might ask, what is to be done? There are 5 points here that they've outlined, and nice. And the last one regarding free speech, and then they have a nice little note to their former colleagues. Real quick though, the first thing to be done is a fundamental principle, and the first step in correcting U.S. policy is for the government of the United States to faithfully execute the law. Okay.
Pretty straightforward.
Which law?
Yeah, that is no, that's very broad.
Now let me tell you this. It is abundantly clear that the administration is currently willfully violating multiple U.S. laws and attempting to deny or distort facts, use loopholes, or manipulate processes to ensure a continuous flow of lethal weapons to Israel. Mm-hmm. So that's what you do when you're a lawyer, though. I mean, all of those things you learn in law school. Yeah. To distort facts, use loopholes, and manipulate processes. I mean, that's kind of your whole job as a lawyer, is to work that.
Yeah, angle, absolutely.
But I'm just saying. That's all. I mean, really, because what my point is that if you want the government to faithfully execute the law, these loopholes are written into the laws, so that another smart lawyer can come along and pull that loophole. We need a completely all new laws. Yeah. I mean, that's that. Secondly, we believe the U.S. government should use all necessary and available leverage to bring the conflict to an immediate close and to achieve the release of all hostages, be they Israelis kidnapped on October 7th or the thousands of Palestinians, many of them children, sitting uncharged in Israeli administrative detention. And that's what you were saying.
That is exactly what I was saying. Absolutely.
Yeah. Third, we believe the United States should commit the funding and the support needed to ensure an immediate expansion of humanitarian assistance to the people of Gaza and the reconstruction of that territory, a moral obligation given that the harm and destruction to date has largely been dealt by American weapons.
Yep.
They want to give them reparations? Homie.
For real?
They don't give reparations in America.
No. That's not a thing that happens here. For anybody.
I mean, good for them if they could get it, but...
I doubt it. They can barely get statehood. They can't get statehood. There's no barely about it.
Reconstruction of the territory and humanitarian assistance to the people is a moral obligation given the harm and destruction to date has largely been dealt by American weapons. I just
and that right great. There, moral obligation is almost the exact opposite of what America ever does. Yeah. So if you say it's a moral obligation, America's already like, peace, I'm out. I don't do moral obligations. I don't understand those.
But we're a good Christian country.
Oh, but we care about everybody. We're so nice to our neighbors.
Dude, what would Jesus do? And that's what, and I covered that on my show.
Jesus would get stuck at the border, y'all. Jesus. Let's be honest. He'd get stuck at the border.
You know?
He wouldn't be getting through.
And and that's why I tear this apart on my show is like, what do we claim is moral in this country and what do we do? Yeah. You know, it's a double
well, and it's similar to that. I'm totally going to butcher the saying because I don't remember how it goes exactly, but not every law is to be upheld because only some laws are moral, that kind of idea. That like just because it's law doesn't mean it's right.
Oh yeah. Yes. It's, I know exactly what you're saying. Yeah.
But that is very much the vibe that I get is just this idea that like, you know, the moral obligation standpoint, I'm like, that's falling on deaf ears. Yeah. You're not reaching anyone with that. But again, it goes back. We kind of talked about this earlier as well. Like, what makes it a moral law? Is it moral just because it's a law? Like, no, we've proven that.
My brain is such a bowl of oatmeal. And I know that we covered this in the Martin Luther King. I think it was the second or third sermon in this book that we're doing right now, Knock at Midnight. And he talks about the different types of laws. Yeah. The just laws and unjust laws. Yeah, absolutely. And which laws we're morally, that we are obligated to not adhere to. So I'm right on the same page with you on that. Because people will say acting by the law is the moral thing to do, but not all laws are moral. No. So that's incorrect. No. And we have to overturn unjust laws. We have to. It's our responsibility as Absolutely. Americans. Yeah. Patriots. I was gonna Full get circle. A shirt. I want a shirt now. If you can hear me, Blossom, I want to say hella patriotic. Yeah, I'm into it. Maybe I'll wear one. Yeah. So fourth, we believe the United States should immediately announce that the policy of the United States will be to support self-determination for the Palestinian people and an end to military occupation and settlements, including in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. Yeah. You quit because they're not doing that. Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you wrote the letter. People wanted me to write a letter when I left one of my last recent jobs. I'm like, why am I writing a letter when they know I'm quitting? But I love this. This is what we're asking people to do. Speak out. Don't be silent. Make a stand. Blah, blah, blah. Absolutely. And then I laugh at you on the radio because you're so idealistic, you little snowflake. It is adorable. I didn't mean it to sound like this when I brought this. I do love that people do these like resignation letters though, but especially, excuse me, when it comes to things like this. Like again, I'm with you. I think it's in other ways it's laughable. Yeah. 100% to be like, I'm leaving and here's why. It's like it's very silly. Yeah. But in situations like this, absolutely, like make your voice heard. Why did you leave? What made you leave? And especially in an unjust situation, as is such at the moment, the more people who bring it up, the more people who talk about it, the more people who leave and resign their jobs because of it. Yeah. It just goes to further the point. Yeah. This is wrong. It's been wrong since the beginning. No part of this has been right. Yeah. And
the fact that people are resigning from this administration in the numbers that they are. I don't remember the last time that this many people resigned from a single administration over the same issue. I can't remember the last time this happened.
Yeah, I fully support this type of resignation letter, and they get into, and I'll go quickly, they get into talking to their other coworkers, and not the ones who are graffitiing this at the water cooler, but the other ones.
The ones who actually care.
The ones that they went out to drinks with on Friday, and they're like, oh yeah, my boss. So fifth, we believe there is an urgent need for change in the organizational cultures and structures that have enabled the current U.S. approach. This includes strengthening of oversight and accountability mechanisms within the executive branch, greater transparency regarding arms transfers and legal deliberations, and into the silences of sidelining and critical voices and statutory change via the legislative process. We commit to working with the executive and legislative branches to detail and pursue such reforms.
Okay.
So they want a whole over change, which is what we're saying.
Yeah.
And then they were talking about freedom of speech being under threat and that people should feel empowered to use their voices.
Absolutely.
The final message to former colleagues: your voice matters. We write to you with hope that you will use your positions to amplify calls for peace and hold your respective institution accountable to the violence unfolding in Palestine. We thank those of you who are working day in and day out to press for just and equitable policies that protect all lives. We recognize the systemic obstacles you face, both as you perform your work and as you consider leaving it. Oh God, this part. We particularly embrace those of you representing America's diversity who feel that your voices have been disempowered, ignored, and tokenized. Just by referring to people as America's diversity, you're tokenizing them. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you just did what you were what was the point of writing that out if you're gonna...
But they're trying, and I just want to tell people really super quick. Like, we got a person here from the Air Force who's, we've got a person here from the Department of Interior.
Oh, yeah, they're from all over.
We've got a person here from the Office of Management and Administration of the White House. We've got someone from the Department of Education, Department of Interior, Defense Intelligence Agency, the Department of the Air Force, three Department of State officials, and one U.S. Agency for International Development, Global Health Bureau. So these are people who are across departments and have different ranks.
And all came together and agreed on this one resignation letter for all of them.
And I think that the reason why Miriam Hassanin was featured is I think she might have had something to do with writing this.
Oh, interesting.
I think so.
Wow.
Don't quote me on that, but it does have some really special 24-year-old language in here. You know? I love it. It's super cute.
24-year-old.
No, it's with your team. She's like, I loved it though, because she was 24. I saw on Democracy Now! In our experience, no decision point is too minor to challenge. Write letters and bring up your disagreements with your team. And I just thought that's really sweet. We encourage you to keep pushing. These are like written like by
someone who still has rubber in their bones and has someone who still has hope. Clearly wrote that.
I love it.
Good for them.
I love it.
Good for them.
This gives me hope. I have hope in the young people.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have hope in these folks who are trained but want to see something different happen.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I feel like, something that made me, the youth always gives me hope. So things like this, the solidarity encampments on college campuses, the youth have also never been in the wrong. Like, historically speaking, if there have been protests on college campuses, it's like, especially ones that covered the country, the students were never on the wrong side of history. Yeah. So the fact that all these solidarity encampments came up on college campuses and university campuses, And then for people to be like, they're terrorists. I'm like, actually, if you look at the historical examples, they are always on the right side of history. Like, it's just, the youth gives me hope for the future. My hope is dwindling, but the youth gives me hope.
Yeah.
Keep it going, guys.
I'm not gonna poke holes, except I am, by saying like little Queen Trashmouth told me like the founding fathers were like 19 and
Hold
20.
on. Okay.
Those are some sketchy youth right there.
Yeah, that is the definition of sketchy youth.
They made a whole country.
Or broke a whole country.
Or broke a whole continent.
Oh boy. That's for another time.
Yes,
we'll talk about that later.
Time? Yes.
Okay, we are gonna say our good nights, actually. Play you a couple more songs and then call it a day. Awesome. That was wonderful. Thank you so much for joining me. Okay, guys, it's been great as always. So much fun. Love you so much. Don't talk to cops. Don't exploit workers, because workers brought you a lot of stuff and continue to do so. If you're exploiting your workers or you treat them poorly, I hope that you're having a terrible weekend. And I hope that you treat people better, because we all live on this planet together and that ain't going to stop anytime soon. So act accordingly. Empathy. Put yourself in the place of me. Think about it. Good thing to think about. All right. I've yammered enough. Love y'all so much. We'll see ya.
Bye.